Hey guys, it's me, James. What follows is a segment of Friday Night Fiction, a new thing I've added to the podcast with fictional crime stories written and narrated by me, created in the style of those entertaining old school shows like the Alfred Hitchcock Hour, Dragnet, and the Twilight Zone. This story, titled Dead Cold Drop, is 27 chapters long and is coming to you in 5 episodes. I hope you enjoy it.
This episode contains explicit content, including profanity and depictions of violence and murder. Listener discretion is advised.
Good evening, and welcome back to Friday Night Fiction. Tonight's tale comes from the frosty streets of Bismarck, North Dakota, where sometimes the biggest chill comes not from the wind, but from an envelope stuffed with 50,000 reasons to lose your sleep and perhaps your wits. We shall meet Mr. Doug Rolfstad, a humble plumber with a taste for whiskey and fishing, whose greatest pride is his vintage boat, his biggest fear anything that threatens his daughter. His 66-year-old world is as predictable as a properly serviced furnace, that is until a package arrives for his only child, brimming with promise or peril. Follow along as this devoted father swaps his trusty wrench for a loaded gun, discovering the hard truth that love may move mountains, but money can unleash monsters. So pour yourself a thimble of something stronger than tea, bolt your doors, and keep one eye on your front step. Because tonight, a father's love may be his salvation or his undoing. Chapter 1. Doug Rolfstad sat in a window booth at Raven's Rest truck stop, coffee mug in hand, watching traffic blur past on the icy interstate. He was 140 miles from his home in Bismarck. Occasionally, an 18-wheeler exited I-94, then crept through the wide parking lot in search of fuel, rest, or a hot lunch and coffee. Other truckers just blew past the Valley City exit, bound for Montana, Minnesota, or some other distant destination. Doug sipped his coffee and frowned into the chipped mug. The taste barely registered. Maybe it was a bad batch. Maybe it was the anxiousness and the waiting. Or maybe his taste buds, now 66 years old, had taken an early retirement. He shifted in the saggy seat, checked his watch, then glanced towards the restaurant entrance for the 10th time. Mandy usually ran late, but today the weight felt heavier. He reassured himself, as fathers always do, that it was nothing. Mandy was fine. She'd be there any minute. "Dad, I need to see you," Mandy had said on the phone the day before, her voice low and clipped, like she was trying not to say too much. "Can you meet me tomorrow in Valley City for lunch?" It made no sense. Like Doug, Mandy lived in Bismarck. Why not meet at a cafe there? And her voice had that edge, that faint quiver he knew by heart, the same tremble he heard when she was 7 years old and thought she'd lost her puppy. At 17, trying to hold it all together after her first real breakup, and more recently at 38, when the liquor store closed down and she'd lost her job. Doug hadn't probed over the phone, though. He didn't get many chances to help his daughter with anything, and he didn't want to blow this opportunity, if that's what this was. So he had simply said, "What time?" and "I'll be there." He scanned the diner again. Whitney Houston echoed in the piped-in music while truckers, ranchers, and farmers sat scattered at tables, either alone or in pairs munching on their steaks or hamburgers. A highway patrol officer was perched at the counter, sipping coffee and watching the muted TV where President Clinton was holding some kind of press conference. Doug settled deeper into his seat and returned his gaze outdoors. He watched as automobiles approached and then slowly disappeared. It was one of those North Dakota days when fog, snow, and sleet all danced together softly with a beautiful filtered haze. Mandy's familiar voice jarred him from his daydreaming. "Hi, Dad." She looked disheveled. Her untied snow boots were salt-stained, their soggy laces dragging on the floor. Her winter coat was smudged at the sleeves, and her pants, well, they weren't pants exactly. They were pink and white pajama bottoms. "Hey, kiddo," Doug said as Mandy slid into the seat across from him. "You made it." She pulled off her gloves and the knit cap she'd gotten years ago from Johnny's Liquors, revealing blonde, shoulder-length hair. "You hungry for lunch?" he asked. Not really. Maybe in a bit," she said. "Coffee, though." Doug motioned to the waitress who swooped in with both regular and decaf. He hesitated, then said, "Did you drive in from Bismarck, too?" His voice was casual, but the elephant in the diner lingered. Why are we 140 miles from home? "Nope," she said, shaking her head and taking her first sip. Doug watched patiently as Mandy scanned the diner, finally resting her gaze on the highway patrolman. "I'm in Valley City for a few days, staying with a friend. I got here yesterday, right before I called you." Doug knew better than to press her. Mandy had always had a roundabout way of getting to the point. Doreen had been the same way. In fact, Mandy was a lot like her mother. She set her mug down, then in that familiar, slightly trembling voice, she said, "Look, Dad, I'm in trouble, and I'm not sure if I can get out. I need help." "What's going on?" Doug said. Mandy leaned in slightly, her movements tense. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "Did you hear about the murder in Bismarck?" Doug gasped and felt that familiar bolt of lightning in his chest, a rapid, electrifying tension that leaped from his heart any time he sensed his only child was at risk. He glanced down at the rolled-up newspaper next to him. Murder in Bismarck. Of course he'd heard about that. It was front-page news that week. A 22-year-old man was found hanging from the awning of a picnic shelter in a city park in Bismarck. Not a suicide, they said, but something much worse. Torturous, gruesome mutilation. The killer or killers were still on the loose, and the city was on high alert and panic-stricken. "Yeah," Doug said, his eyes wide. "I've heard." He swallowed, braced himself, and then said, "Why?" Mandy's voice faltered. "Well, his name was Alex Schatz, and I think I might know why he was killed." Chapter 2. "Jesus, Mandy, what do you mean you know why he was killed?" "Because," Mandy said, "something happened a couple days ago." She stared at the ceiling, searching. She scratched her forehead, frowning, her hand trembling slightly. "Was it yesterday?" "No, 2 days ago. Wednesday. Jesus, feels like forever ago." During his 2-hour drive to Valley City that Friday, Doug had actually savored the break from his normal routine. Most mornings he fired up the little service truck with Doug's Plumbing painted on the side and spent the day replacing water heaters or fixing pipes. At night, he either sanded his vintage boat in the garage or watched a ball game on TV. Murder had never figured into that rhythm. "What, Mandy? What happened?" She closed her eyes briefly while shaking her head. "You're not going to believe this. Let me start from the beginning, okay?" Doug nodded quickly, struggling to stay patient. "Okay, it was Wednesday. I stayed in bed until like 1 p.m. because I felt like crap. I was hungover, actually, just lying there thinking about my pathetic life, and everything that's happened. Doug knew what his daughter was getting at. She'd been through a lot. First, her mom passed away. Then Johnny, her employer, closed his store, leaving her out of work again. Then she got arrested for possession of marijuana. She had been in a kind of downward spiral lately. All at once it hit me, Mandy said. I've had enough hangovers, enough of being broke and feeling just sad. I mean, I'll never not be sad about Mom, but you know. Doug nodded and waited. I told myself it's time to turn things around, get a job, get back on my feet. I even started thinking about the floral shop again, and I realized that's what I really want to do someday. It won't be the same without Mom, but it's what I want to do. And besides, wouldn't Mom want me to follow her dream? Doug's heart twitched. Before Doreen got sick, she and Mandy had been working on a beautiful mother-daughter dream together to open a floral shop in Mandan. They'd even found the perfect location. It was in the old train station and smacked of the 1930s and 40s when men tipped their hats and most everyone still went to church and the world moved a little slower. They even had the name all picked out, Depot Dreams Floral. But then, out of nowhere, cancer had swept in, stealing the dream before it could bloom. And obviously right now I'm light years from being able to start a business, but, baby steps. So I made a plan. First get a damn job and out of debt, then go from there. So before I even crawled out of bed, I made a pledge to myself. I would apply for 3 jobs every day, no exceptions. Doug's eyes focused on his daughter, hanging on her every word. It was a simple plan. Wake up each morning, get the paper off the front step, circle 3 ads, and then make the phone calls, or jump in the car and apply in person. I even said it out loud just to make it really stick. Mandy, this is the week you turn things around. A wave of parental guilt washed over Doug. He knew things were tough for Mandy with money, but he hadn't been able to help her out much recently. Something was always getting in the way. Fixing leaky faucets wasn't exactly a gold mine, and the mountain of cancer bills on his kitchen counter wasn't evaporating on its own either. Throw in a broken transmission, and poof, money all gone. He tried to help her out in other ways when he could, drop off a bag of cat food or tune up her lawnmower when it was giving her trouble. He forced the thoughts away as Mandy continued. So that's what I did. I got out of bed, made a pot of coffee, and I found a ballpoint pen. Then I went to grab the newspaper off the front step, and that's when things got weird. The truth is, I'd hardly been out of the house since Sunday, let alone read the newspaper, so there were 3 papers out there, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. I grabbed all 3, and one of them felt really heavy, and not just like the Sunday edition feels heavy. This was really heavy. So there I am on the couch unfolding this newspaper, and then this thick envelope falls into my lap, a manila envelope. See, it wasn't the real newspaper, just the first section of Monday's Herald wrapped around the package to make it look like a newspaper. Rubber band and plastic sleeve and everything. It must have been lying out there for over 2 days. It was Monday's paper. My address was written on the envelope, so I figured I'd open it. For a second, I thought it might be an early Valentine's gift from this guy, Jason. He lives down the street, and lately he's been kind of flirting with me. Honestly, part of me hoped it was. Been so long since anything nice had happened. Mandy's eyes swept across the diner, her eyes landing again on the state trooper. But Dad, it wasn't a Valentine's present. It was money. A lot of money. Really? Doug said, surprised. How much? $50,000. Cash. Chapter 3. $50,000? Doug whispered. Mandy nodded slowly. Yeah, all in $100 bills. It was like out of a movie. Doug stared at his daughter, her words echoing in his head. He swallowed hard, his throat feeling drier by the second. He leaned over the table, then whispered, You're telling me you just found someone put $50,000 rolled up in your newspaper and left it on your front step? Mandy simply nodded, her eyes locked on her father's. Yeah, it's still there at my house, still in the same envelope. I was so freaked out I just stuffed it under the couch. What in the hell? Doug said, his eyes wide, his mind racing. Do you have any idea, I don't know, what it's all about? Mandy's eyes lit up. Well, I thought I did at first. I mean, think about it. I had just said to myself, this is the day you turn it all around, and then not 10 minutes later, just like that, 50 grand just drops into my lap? If that's not a miracle, I don't know what is. A miracle? Doug said. You know, Mom up there in heaven. She was telling me to follow our dream. Think about it. When Mom and I were crunching numbers to open up Depot Dreams, how much did we figure we needed to really knock it out of the park? To really succeed? How much, Dad? Doug's mouth opened, but the words didn't come right away. Finally, slowly, like the answer was being pulled from the depths of his memory, he said, $50,000. All day it was like a dream, Dad, a wonderful dream. Mom wasn't back, but I could feel her presence, you know? She was here in spirit telling me to go and get started. And I was going to do it for me and for her. In fact, I even fell asleep that night in peace. Doug nodded, his mind scrambling, a lump in his throat now. But then I woke up in the middle of the night, and when I woke up, I really snapped out of it. I realized there might be some other explanations for that money, scary ones, like drug money, you know? Doug did know. Drug money had been the first thing that popped into his head. Not that he knew anything about that world other than what he'd seen on TV shows, but it made a lot more sense to him than Doreen dropping $50K from the sky. The waitress appeared with coffee and began topping off their mugs. Mandy and Doug sat up straight, smiled, nodded, and said, "Thank you." Mandy watched and waited as the waitress walked out of earshot. So I got up and I'm pacing around my living room like a lunatic at 4 a.m. Even Cowboy was meowing at me to shut the hell up. I tried to make sense of it all and figure out what to do, go to the cops, call you, call Pastor Lundeen, but I couldn't decide. Mandy rubbed her forefinger at a faint coffee stain on the table, her hand unsteady. So finally I just crawled back into bed and I prayed. I asked God to give me a sign, to show me what this money's all about, you know? Please, Lord, give me a sign, I said. That kind of helped settle me down, and after a while I fell asleep again. Doug's mind was spinning. He held up a palm to Mandy, a time out. Then he chugged the glass of water in front of him. He rubbed his neck, massaging the dry throat inside. He shook his head in disbelief, swallowed more water, then said, "The murder, Mandy. What's this about that murder?" "Exactly," she said, nodding again. "The murder. God gave me a sign, all right." When I woke up, I got the newspaper from the front step. No $100 bills this time, just the Bismarck Herald and huge headlines about Alex Schott's murder. See, I recognized his name right away, but at first I couldn't place it. Then I read the articles, and that's when it hit me. It was all right there. Alex Schatz worked for the Herald. He delivered newspapers. Dad, he was my paper guy. He delivered newspapers to my door. Now he's dead. Chapter 4. "Don't you see, Dad?" Mandy whispered. "This kid must have been involved in some super seedy shit, right? And I don't know why he put that money on my porch, but I'm thinking it got him killed. I mean, I bet it wasn't his money. And I know sure as shit he wasn't just giving it to me, a random Herald subscriber. I don't even know the guy. I only talked to him once when I handed him a personal check for like $15 or something. A tiny, Christmas bonus." Doug rubbed his temples, still shaking his head. "So there I am, standing in my kitchen, staring at this article. Cowboy is meowing at me for food, and all I can think about is this. Somebody somewhere is looking for that money, and I'm thinking it's the same people that tortured that Alex kid in the park. Then I think, if Alex told them what he did with the money, where he put it, and if that's what this is all about, well, they could knock on my door at any second, right? Any second. I just dropped the paper, grabbed my keys and wallet, and headed to the door. I jumped in my car and just drove. Honestly, I'm not even sure if I locked the door. Then once it dawned on me that I'm driving around Bismarck aimlessly in my pajamas, I pulled over and parked just to figure out what to do. I thought about going home quickly to get Cowboy and maybe some clothes, but I couldn't risk it. I mean, did you read about what they did? How he was killed? Doug swallowed dry, nodding. There was a pause, and then Mandy said, I mean, Dad, there's no way it's a coincidence, right? The money, the murder? Doug inhaled and shook his head slowly. No, Mandy, I don't think it's a coincidence. Jesus Christ. They'll be coming for me next, won't they? Mandy said. They'll be coming for the money, he said. That much we can count on. He looked out the window at Interstate 94 and the foggy horizon beyond, a dozen questions swirling in his mind. For years, Doug had dreamed of a chance to help his daughter in some real and significant way, but this was no leaky faucet, not a simple front-wheel alignment on her car. This was something else altogether. Mandy stared at him, eyes brimming with fear. Dad, what should I do? Well, Doug said, the quickest way out of this is to go to the cops and tell them what happened. After all, Mandy hadn't done anything wrong. She hadn't stolen the money. Whoever left it there on her step had dragged her into this. None of it was her fault. Dad, you don't get it, she said, her voice rising. This is a murder case, a high-profile one. Do you really think they're going to believe me when I say Alex Schatz randomly dropped $50,000 on my welcome mat before he was murdered? Doug opened his mouth to argue, but Mandy stopped him in his tracks. I'm still on parole, remember? Her voice was trembling again. I'm not supposed to be anywhere near drugs or crime. I'm pretty sure they're not just going to shrug their shoulders when I waltz into Bismarck PD and tell them I have a $50,000 connection to Alex Schatz. What are they going to say? Okay, Mandy, thanks for stopping in. Doug opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came. He hated hearing the word parole. It still felt surreal. It was weed, for God's sakes. Marijuana. People smoked it in peace all over the country, but here in North Dakota, a couple of joints in her purse had landed her a felony. In a way, he couldn't really blame Mandy for losing faith in the system. Okay, I've got another idea, Doug said. Chapter 5. Okay, hear me out. If anyone can help, it's Mike Berger. He's smart, Mandy. He won't drag you into some mess. Mandy eyed her father suspiciously. When Doug Rolfstad and Mike Berger were just a couple of lanky 17-year-olds on the basketball court, the team was good, maybe even great, but it didn't compare to the bond they shared. On the court, they could practically read each other's minds, and Mike never got rattled, not even in the tightest games. Mike had turned that cool-headedness into a career in law enforcement. These days, he was with BCI, the North Dakota Bureau of Criminal Investigation. Doug and Mike had remained friends. They still fished together 3 or 4 times a year. When Doreen went into hospice, Mike had been the first to call. He knows how this stuff works, Doug said. He was at your baptism. He's practically family. Mandy shook her head, her expression resolute. And what's he going to do, Dad? Tell you everything's fine? He's your friend, I get it, but he's not family. His job is to solve crimes and put people in jail, not protect me. Well, he can help us protect you from whoever killed that Schatz kid. Mandy had sighed then, her shoulders slumping. Her entire posture seemed to shrivel up in defeat. You mean protect me by locking me up, she said softly. Doug took a deep breath and sat back, thinking. The highway patrolman stood at the register paying his tab. Doug cleared his throat and looked at Mandy. Okay, what about a lawyer? He said. A lawyer? Yep, attorney-client privilege or something like that. He imagined it like a 2-step plumbing job. First, you address the emergency, stop the leaking. Only then do you start looking at replacing the pipes. Mandy could tell a defense lawyer anything, and by law he couldn't repeat a word. And while a defense attorney wasn't exactly a bodyguard, he could guide her on how to come forward to the police without feeling like she was somehow incriminating herself. And once the cops were on her side, they might be able to offer the protection she needed. Mandy's voice was low and slow, the weight of it all pressing down on her. And they wouldn't let me say anything stupid that could get me into more trouble, right? Exactly, Doug said. Mandy frowned and bit her lip. Lawyers cost a fortune, Dad. I can hardly afford cat food. The truth was, Doug wasn't sure he could afford a lawyer either, but he didn't care anymore. One more financial hit wouldn't matter, not with Mandy's safety on the line. Doesn't matter how, he said. I'll figure it out. Worst case, I can sell the boat. Sell Grandpa's boat? Mandy's eyes shimmered. I don't want you to lose everything because of me. Everything, Doug thought. What monumental fatherly failures had he committed for Mandy to not understand that she was in fact everything to him now? We lost your mom. Ain't gonna lose you too. Her lip trembled then, and for a long moment she just stared at him. Then finally she nodded. Okay, an attorney then. Doug waved the waitress in and asked for more coffee and 2 menus. Now, can you stay with your friend here a little longer? You can't go anywhere near your place until we figure this out. You know that, right? Mandy nodded. Yeah, I'm safe here. All right, Doug said. As soon as I get home, I'll find an attorney. We'll get through this, kiddo, I promise. Doug had spotted a flicker of hope in her eyes. It wasn't much, but it was enough for now. He even managed to get her to eat some lunch. As he watched her nibble on her patty melt and pick at her fries, he tried to block the image of those psychopaths who tortured and mutilated Alex Schatz, possibly sitting outside Mandy's house right now. Or maybe they'd already let themselves inside. They could be there right now, sitting on her couch with Cowboy the cat resting in their lap, just waiting. Well, Mr. Rolfstad's icy trip to the truck stop in Valley City has suddenly become a little more interesting than a BLT and a side of French fries. Join us next week on Friday Night Fiction, and we shall see how the terrorized city of Bismarck might collide with our mild-mannered plumber, Mr. Doug Rolfstad. Friday Night Fiction is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. This story is created and owned by James Wolner 2025, all rights reserved. No part of this story may be reproduced, distributed, or adapted in any form without explicit written permission. Unauthorized use of this material is strictly prohibited and protected under applicable copyright laws. Check out more at dakotaspotlight.com.